Two separate courts in the Nigeria Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, on Tuesday fixed October 27th and November 20th, 2025 for the commencement of the lawsuits brought before them by the founder and publisher of Sowore Reporters, Omoyele Sowore, and the Department of State Service, DSS, over issue of posts published on X and Facebook social media platforms that allegedly described President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as a criminal after the president allegedly said there is no more corruption in Nigeria while the president was speaking at an event in Brazil in the month of August 2025. According to Omoyele Sowore's lawyer, Tope Temokan, today, at the Federal High Court in Abuja, proceedings commenced in the historic cases filed by rights activist Omoyele Sowore challenging the clampdown on free speech and political expression by the Department of State Services, SSS, in collusion with global social media giants Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and X Corporation, Twitter. The suits are Omoyele Sowore vs. SSS and Meta, FHC, ABJ, CS, 1887-2025. Omoyele Sowore vs. SSS and X Corporation, FHC, ABJ, CS, 1888-2025. Sowore was represented by a formidable team of lawyers, led by Tope Temokan, Abubakar Marshall, Alexander Aketa, Dr. S.M. Oyaha, Dr. Maxwell Opara, Akin Sowore, and Akoje Sava. Representation for the respondents. Meta appeared through Mafesimo Teo Yetabo, San. X Corporation and the DSS had no counsel present in court proceedings. The court granted motions ex parte filed by Sowore's counsel for leave to serve Meta and X Corporation outside jurisdiction through electronic means. The originating motion against Meta was also served in court on Meta's counsel. Adjournment. The court adjourned both matters to November 20, 2025, for hearing. These suits filed, following the DSS attempted censorship of Sowore's social media post, calling the president a criminal, mark a significant stand against both local repression and international collaboration in silencing dissenting voices. Sowore insists that no government agency or foreign corporation has the right to muzzle Nigerians in the digital space, Barrister Tope Temokan stated on September 30, 2025. At a separate court where the federal government of Nigeria filed a 5-count charges against the news media publisher, Omoyele Sowore and the DSS had planned to arraign the publisher before the court. Vanguard newspaper reported that, when the matter came up, Sowore's counsel, Marshal Abubakar, objected to the charges being read, arguing that his client had not been properly served. He also noted the absence of legal representation for X. However, Meta was represented in court by a team led by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Teo Yetabo. Justice Muhammad Umar, presiding, directed that Sowore be served in court, an order not opposed by any of the parties, including Muhammad Babadoko, Director of Public Prosecutions of the Federation. The court then adjourned the case to October 27 for commencement of trial. Punch newspaper also reported that the DPPF then applied for an order to serve Sowore in open court, which the judge granted. Sowore accepted the documents in court. He subsequently requested 3 days, as provided by law, to study the charge and prepare his defense. While the DPPF objected, Justice Garba upheld the request and adjourned the arraignment to October 27. The court will adjourn to the 27th day of October for the arraignment of the defendants, Justice Garba said. The suit dated the 16th of September 2025 was lodged after Sowore allegedly refused to delete the controversial posts about the president. The Sahara Reporters publisher was accused of using his official X handle to make the post. This criminal at official PBAT actually went to Brazil to state that there is no more corruption under his regime in Nigeria. What audacity to lie shamelessly. The alleged offending post, said to be contrary to Section 24(2)(b) of the Cybercrimes Prohibition and Prevention Act 2024, was said to have been made on August 25 within the jurisdiction of the Federal High Court. The charges were brought on behalf of the DSS and the federal government by MB Abubakar, Director of Public Prosecutions at the Federal Ministry of Justice, alongside 4 other counsel to the DSSM, E. Ernest, U.B. Buller, Dr. C.S. Ez, and E.G. Orabor. Social media companies X Incorporation and Meta Platforms Incorporation are listed as co-defendants. Confirming the legal action in a Facebook post last week, Sowore wrote, "The State Security Service, alias at Officials Inc. today filed a 5-count charge at the Federal High Court in Abuja against X, formerly Twitter Facebook, and myself. They claimed that because I called Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu a criminal, I have somehow committed a set of novel offenses they invented and spread across 5 counts. It's hard to believe there's anyone sensible left in these offices that should be making Nigeria work. Regardless, I will be present whenever this case is assigned for trial." Revolutiono. Punch Online had earlier reported that the human rights activist and African Action Congress candidate in the 2023 election vowed not to delete the controversial tweet, despite a request from the DSS to X demanding its removal. Restating his stance, Sowore wrote, "This morning, X, formerly Twitter, officially contacted me about the despicable threat letter they received from the lawless DSS over my tweet on Tinubu. One option I will not be taking is deleting the tweet. Thank you, at X."
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Information from the Nigerian Presidency has indicated that there is a plan by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to begin legal action against the country's former president, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, over sustained and continuous rumors in certain quarters that ex-President Jonathan may have indicated interest to recontest as Nigeria president in 2027. The Special Advisor to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, said Jonathan is welcome to join the 2027 presidential electoral race, but Jonathan will have his date in the court of the land. Indeed, the jury will determine whether Jonathan, who was sworn in twice as president, satisfies the constitutional requirements and is eligible to contest the presidency and be sworn in, if successful, for a 3rd term in office. It would be recalled that ex-President Jonathan was one of the most criticized presidents in Nigeria, with politicians, including President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was then a chieftain of the Action Congress of Nigeria, ACN, forming a coalition of All Progressives Congress, APC, to defeat the incumbent president in 2015. Currently, there is also a coalition formed by politicians in Nigeria, the African Democratic Congress, ADC, to defeat and remove President Tinubu from office in 2027, and lately, reports indicated that the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, is considering joining the African Democratic Congress, ADC, but no official announcement has been made. The speculation intensified after Jonathan met with ADC National Chairman, David Mark, in late September 2025. Amidst ongoing discussions about the 2027 presidential election. And Jonathan's closed-door meeting with ADC leaders on September 25, 2025, fueled widespread speculation about his potential run for the presidency on their platform. In a statement issued on Monday, Bayo Onanuga, the spokesperson to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, said, "As we begin the march towards the 2027 elections prematurely foisted on the nation by the desperation of the opposition ganging up against President Bola Tinubu despite his glaring giant economic strides, we are once again regaled with a cacophony of voices, most of them full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, to paraphrase inimitable William Shakespeare in one of his classic works, Macbeth." One recent statement that stands out in its absurdity is Professor Jerry Garner's. The former Minister of Information and National Orientation, moving to draft former President Goodluck Jonathan into the 2007 presidential race, affirmed that the former president would contest the coming election on the platform of the discredited People's Democratic Party, PDP, which bequeathed a legacy of economic ruins, after 16 years of bad governance. Garner even deluded himself, asserting that the former president would defeat President Tinubu to reclaim power after 12 years. Professor, garner of the defunct MAMSER fame, is free to delude himself and engage in his usual comedy. After all, Jonathan's entering the race would provide another job for the Niger state-born former university don. However, we should caution former President Jonathan to be wary of the PDP sugar-coated cheerleaders. Politicians of Jerry Garner's ilk merely want to lure him into the race to satisfy their personal, political, religious, and ethnic interests. They will abandon him midstream, as they did in 2015, and leave gentleman Jonathan in the lurch. Don't get us wrong, President Jonathan reserves the right to run if he wishes. It is his inalienable right to contest the presidency again. President Tinubu will wholeheartedly welcome him if he decides to enter the race. But Jonathan will have his date in the court of the land. Indeed, the jury will determine whether Jonathan, who was sworn in twice as president, satisfies the constitutional requirements and is eligible to contest the presidency and be sworn in, if successful, for a third term in office. Shorn of all those selfish considerations for which some PDP big guns find his candidacy appealing, President Jonathan will also have his encounter with the people as to whether he has anything new to offer after his disastrous 6 years, for which they voted him out in 2015. Let us remind ourselves about Jonathan's record. We cannot forget in a hurry how his regime, devoid of any clear economic agenda, engaged in frivolous spending, ran the economy aground and put the country in dire straits. The nation's economic downturn, which President Tinubu is working very hard to overcome, actually began under President Jonathan. The Jonathan administration severely damaged the economy, and all key indicators declined under his watch. Under him, the so-called business moguls allocated foreign exchange to import fuel, simply pocketing the dollars without importing anything. Some of those big men still have court cases on the issue today. Jonathan and his national security advisor, Colonel Sambo Dasuki, retired, freely distributed security funds to friends and cronies. In 2010, President Jonathan inherited a total of $66 billion, of which $46 billion was in foreign reserves and $20 billion in the noble but abused excess crude account. By 2015, when the people democratically removed him from office, the foreign reserves had fallen below $30 billion, and the excess crude account had been depleted to $2 billion, despite generating record revenue from crude oil sales that the country had never achieved in more than 25 years combined. It is on record that between 2010 and 2013, crude oil sold for an average of $100 per barrel. By December 2014, however, the Jonathan-led federal government could no longer pay salaries to federal civil servants. At least 28 states across the country owed workers huge salary arrears. In contrast, President Tinubu has taken bold decisions over the last 28 months to reset the economy, removing the ruinous fuel subsidy and abolishing multiple exchange rates, which paved the way for arbitrage to flourish. The president has stabilized the economy in slightly over 2 years in office. In 2025 Q2, the gross domestic product grew by 4.23%, the highest in 4 years, outpacing the 3.4% projected by the International Monetary Fund. Inflation decreased to 20.12% in August 2025, the lowest level in 3 years. The foreign reserves stand presently at $42.03 billion. The Naira has virtually stabilized. Investor confidence in our economy has been restored, and investors are betting on Nigeria. In plain language, the nation has turned the corner, and our people have started reaping the gains of the bold reforms instituted by the Tinubu administration. Road infrastructure is being boosted. Old roads are being reconstructed while new ones, like the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway and the Sokoto-Badagry Highway, among others, are springing up. The government is addressing security issues in some parts of the country. We can go on and on, reeling out the many macroeconomic gains of the Tinubu administration. However, the point is that the PDP and Jerry Garner's co-travelers broke the economy. President Tinubu is fixing it. President Jonathan and others are welcome to the 2027 race. They broke the economy before, but millions of Nigerians, who will not easily forget the recent past, will not allow them to return and run it down again.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Friday stated that many world leaders who do come out publicly to condemn the Israel war in Gaza do privately thank Israel for staging the war against Hamas, and according to Benjamin Netanyahu, the world leaders tell me how much they value Israel's superb intelligence services that have prevented time and again terrorist attacks in their capitals, time and again saving countless lives. General George Keegan, former head of U.S. Air Force intelligence, once said, if the United States had to gather on its own the intelligence that Israel gives us, we would have to establish 5 CIAs. This past June, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, German Chancellor Merz admitted the truth. This, Benjamin Netanyahu stated when the speech was being broadcast live via huge loudspeakers that were placed on the Gaza border while the Israel Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, which, his appearance drew a mix of applause and protest, with some delegates walking out of the hall as he took the stage. You know deep down that Israel is fighting your fight. I want to tell you a secret. Behind closed doors, many of the leaders who publicly condemn us, privately thank us, Benjamin Netanyahu stated in response. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated and blamed the Israel war in Gaza on Iran, saying, Iran terror axis threatened the peace of the entire world. Some parts of the long speech by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations General Assembly are presented verbatim below. Mr. President, the families of our dear hostages languishing in the dungeons of Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, last year, I stood at this podium, and I showed this map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. From Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah had launched thousands of missiles and rockets at our cities, terrorizing our citizens. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel, while choking global trade at the mouth of the Red Sea. So what's happened over the past year? We've hammered the Houthis, including yesterday. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal. Remember those beepers? The pages. We paged Hezbollah, and believe me, they got the message and thousands of terrorists dropped to the ground. We destroyed Assad's armaments in Syria. We deterred Iran's Shiite militias in Iraq. And most importantly, and above everything else that I could say to you all that we did in this past year, in this past decade, we devastated Iran's atomic weapons and ballistic missile programs. Here's where things stand today. Half the Houthi leadership are Yemen, gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, they're still deterred. And their leaders, if they attack Israel, will also be gone. And for Iran's top military commanders and its top nuclear scientists, well, they're gone too. Israel's 12-day war with Iran, which I renamed Operation Rising Lion, that's from the Bible. This 12-day war will go down in the annals of military history. Our daring pilots neutralized Iran's missile defenses and took control of the skies over Tehran. You saw this. Israeli fighter pilots and American B-2 pilots bombed Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. I want to thank President Trump for his bold and decisive action. President Trump and I promised to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. And we delivered on that promise. We removed an existential threat to Israel, and a mortal threat to the civilized world. We lifted a dark cloud that could have claimed millions and millions of lives. But, ladies and gentlemen, we must remain vigilant. We must remain absolutely clear-minded and vigilant. We must not allow Iran to rebuild its military nuclear capacities. Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, these stockpiles must be eliminated. And tomorrow, UN Security Council sanctions on Iran must be snapped back. Thanks to the resolve of our people, the courage of our soldiers, and the bold decisions we took, Israel rebounded from its darkest day to deliver one of the most stunning military comebacks in history. But we're not done yet. The final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job, and that is why we want to do so as fast as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, much of the world no longer remembers October 7th. But we remember, Israel remembers October 7th. On that day, I'll tell you, you can remember October 7th too. You see this large pin here? It's a QR code. What I ask you to do is hold up your phones, zoom in, and you too will see why we fight, and why we must win. It's all in here. On October 7th, Hamas carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. They slaughtered 1,200 innocent people, including over 40 Americans, and foreign nationals from dozens of countries represented here. They beheaded men. They raped women. They burned babies alive. They burned babies alive in front of their parents. What monsters! These monsters took more than 250 people hostage. Those included Holocaust survivors, grandmothers, and the grandchildren. Who takes hostage grandmothers and grandchildren? Hamas does. So far, we've brought home 207 of these hostages. But 48 still remain in the dungeons of Gaza. 20 of them are alive, starved, tortured, deprived of any daylight, deprived of humanity. These are the names of the 20 living hostages. Matan Angrest, Gali and Ziv Berman, brothers, Elkanah Bobot, Rom Braslavsky, Nimrod Cohen, Ariel and David Cuneo, another pair of brothers, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Eviatar David. You saw the picture of Eviatar David. Emaciated, forced to dig his own grave. Maxim Herken, Eitan Horn, Segev Kalfan, Bar Cooperstein, Omri Meiron, Eitan Moore, Yosef Haim Ohana, Alon Ohel, Avanatan Nur and Matan Zangauka. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do something I've never done before. I want to speak from this forum directly to those hostages through loudspeakers. I've surrounded Gaza with massive loudspeakers connected to this microphone in the hope that our dear hostages will hear my message. I will say it first in Hebrew, and then in English. Hebrew, our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu, speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you. Not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter, and we will not rest, until we bring all of you home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried, they're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans. So to the remaining Hamas leaders, and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages. All of them. The whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down. Ladies and gentlemen, if Hamas agrees to our demands, the war could end right now. Gaza would be demilitarized. Israel would retain overriding security control, and a peaceful civilian authority would be established by Gazans and others committed to peace with Israel. Of course, you understand that the war in Gaza has affected every Israeli. But I am sure there are people in New York, London, Melbourne and elsewhere who are probably thinking, what does all of this have to do with me? The answer is, everything. Because our enemies are your enemies. Let's do something else. Another first at the UN. Let's do a pop quiz. Raise your hand if you know the answer. First question. Who shouts, "Death to America"? Is it A, Iran, B, Hamas, C, Hezbollah, D, the Houthis, or E, all of the above? All of the above. Correct. All of the above. Second question. Who has murdered Americans and Europeans in cold blood? A. Al-Qaeda, B. Hamas, C. Hezbollah, D. Iran, or E. all of the above? Correct again. All of the above. So here's the point I want to make. Our enemies hate all of us with equal venom. They want to drag the modern world back to the past, to a dark age of violence, fanaticism, and terror. I think many of you are already feeling in your own societies the radical Islamist surge. I'm sure you do. You know deep down that Israel is fighting your fight. I want to tell you a secret. Behind closed doors, many of the leaders who publicly condemn us, privately thank us. They tell me how much they value Israel's superb intelligence services that have prevented time and again terrorist attacks in their capitals, time and again saving countless lives. General George Keegan, former head of U.S. Air Force intelligence, once said, "If the United States had to gather on its own the intelligence that Israel gives us, we would have to establish 5 CIAs. 5 CIAs. This past June, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, German Chancellor Merz admitted the truth. He said, "Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us." President Trump understands better than any other leader that Israel and America face a common threat. He showed the world that when Iran and its proxies murder Americans, take Americans hostage, shout death to America, burn American flags and try to assassinate the President of the United States, not once, but twice. He showed them there is a price to pay for all that. Regrettably, many leaders who are represented in this hall, they send a very different message. Sure, in the days immediately following October 7th, many of them supported Israel. But that support quickly evaporated when Israel did what any self-respecting nation would do in the wake of such a savage attack.
Sowore Radio, bringing you the news in a more digital way. Sowore Radio, bringing you the news in a more digital way.